First thing I want to do is thank all of you who are still here who have hung in to the end of the TVIW 2017. It's been awesome so far, and it's not over yet. We're going to have the out briefs from the working tracks, but I'll shut up and turn it over to Speaker, or Dr. Hampson, sorry.
This is the problem of being known by many, many names. So for those of you who participated in the working tracks, you know that we've been herding cats for 3 days. For those of you who don't know what the working tracks do, the working tracks are the ability to get together and discuss a topic to death. We actually take a topic that has keen interest in our community, and it's forward thinking. We want to know, what does it take to get where we need to be to launch our interstellar exploration and colonization missions. So each of us are going to, we had 3 tracks. We're going to tell you a little bit and give you just a brief capture of our conversations and our conclusions and our potential output. We are all working on some form of output, which would be a paper for JBIS or for the proceedings, potentially other outlets as well. And we have some ideas that we will continue to develop over the next few months. So this does not stop here. It's not 6 hours and we're done. This is something we want to continue. So the working track that I chaired, that I moderated, was the evolving role of security and intelligence in interstellar exploration and colonization, turning paranoia into preparation. As we started off, I had an idea where I thought this would go, but I'm not a security and intel professional, and I had no idea what was going to happen. The role of security and intelligence, we have determined, is one that dovetails very nicely with the panel this morning. It's one of culture. Security and intel is a culture that we have to build in from the start. When we look at a mission to explore or colonize, and we chose colonization, starting 100, 150, maybe 200 years from now, we're looking at building colony ships that are going to have to go out. We have a number of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We did a SWOT analysis, and we looked at where the threats were, where the opportunities were, how security and intel provide strengths, and what the weaknesses are. And we divided mission into 3 phases. One is a pre-launch or build phase. One is the cruise phase. That's the actual travel from one point to another. Because frankly, once you leave Earth, a lot of the threats change. You leave a lot of the problems behind. And at that point, the culture you have built becomes paramount, because that's what's going to build the internal. And one of the things that we looked at in terms of building that culture, both in the pre-launch and the cruise phase and in the arrival phase, is building in a culture in which all members have buy-in. We are not going to have crew and passengers. There will be no passengers on an interstellar exploration. Everybody is crew because everybody has a role, because rotation of the roles avoids stratification, and it gives you a continuity in your culture. One way to do that might be in terms of having a hybrid ship, which is partly sleepers and partly awake crew for multiple generations, because the people who sleep for an extended period of time give you an opportunity to have people awake and alive at the end of your mission who were there at the beginning. And that gives you cultural continuity. But the idea is to build in the security and intelligence from the start, to look at the threats. External threats are paramount during the pre-launch and build phase. Those are the external actors. That's the caution for whether or not you build the ship right. Make sure that it can't be sabotaged, it can't be diverted. And again, you have to build your crew at this point, and it's very important to have a charter, have some sort of governance, have an idea that is common. You also want to make the people want to go. So you're going to have to build in extra space. You're going to have to build in expansion space for during the mission, because if it's a generation ship, those generations are going to grow. You have to have a place for people to go. The weaknesses that we run into are that such a ship would be fragile. We need to build in redundancy. We talked about the idea of having an AI, but not a strong AI, not a full artificial intelligence that is operating at the same function, but something like a much more sophisticated expert system that can help us with all of these. Once we launch, the threats are internal. And the threats could be enemy actors. It could be people who decided they don't want to go. It could be people who just plain snap. So we have to be cautious and make sure that we have good medical care, that we have a good system. Again, it comes down to culture. We want a culture in which everybody is invested in the outcome, because when they're invested in the outcome, they're not going to be working against us. We do recognize that even during the cruise phase, there's two parts. There's before and after the point of no return. If the situation is dire enough and if the energy budget is there, it may be possible to turn this ship around. It's not something desirable, but we have to keep in mind that there will be a difference in how the culture is viewed and how the threats are viewed once we pass that point of no return. The opportunities are in building in a culture that sees everybody as playing a role in both the security and intelligence. Citizen soldiers, a militia, a rotation. Maybe not so much that you elect a captain, but that captaincy and leadership in the colony or in the ship rotates so that you don't build in stratification and little fiefdoms. And the other thing that you have to keep doing both through the cruise phase and in the landing, arrival phase, is you're always wanting to take a look around you. We don't want our ships to become the Heinlein orphans of the sky. So we're always looking at the outside. We're doing science on the way, and we're always looking around, because there is one additional external threat that we recognized, and that's the fact that Earth is going to continue to progress. And transportation and propulsion technology is very likely to progress. And one model of an interstellar exploration is to throw out lots of supply pods along the track, launching them before you launch your manned crewed ship, and use those pods as you catch up with them. We don't want somebody that leaves Earth after our ship to decide, hey, look, there's a nice rich pod out there, just ripe for the taking. So yes, we're going to have a little bit of paranoia, we're going to have security, we're going to have intel, but the big take-home message is we build it into the culture from the start. All right, thank you. And what we're going to do is we're going to have the presentations of each of the tracks, and then we will open up to questions and answers.
My name is Scott Guerin with Ken Wizian. He and I co-moderated a working track about developing a SETI science exhibition as part of the public outreach program for TVIW and the SETI community at large. Ken had submitted a separate proposal to mine, and in Robert's good wisdom, he shotgun married us, and we had our own form of first contact. So the goals for our workshop were to design a 5,000 square foot traveling exhibit, which is about 2 tennis courts. We wanted to workshop 2 organizational strategies. We had about up to 15 people in the room, so we were able to have 2 teams, and in a form of design Darwinism, have competing ideas thrash out the 2 different exhibit ideas. We wanted to develop key takeaway messages that the public needed to learn, identify potential artifacts, and conceive some topics for the exhibition. Now, the subject of SETI is vast, and this odd diagram shows the information space that is loaded with the 200-pound gorillas, along with every other topic. So you can imagine an exhibit looks at a 3-dimensional intersection of these to determine which stories you might want to pick out. We examined certain subsets of this. In general, one exhibit focused on the Fermi paradox, the other exhibit focused on SETI topics, including first contact. The main challenge. Exhibit parameters. If any of you have been to a science exhibit, it's frightening to spend a lot of money on something that people spend about 10 to 20 minutes in. That's the case. For an average visitor, 20 minutes. For a quick drive-by, it'll be 5 to 10 minutes. For a dedicated visitor, a 5,000 square foot exhibit might occupy an hour. We were looking for a few key messages. We considered the need for website and social media tie-ins, and we wanted to ask questions, not answer them, and we wanted to extend the engagement, both pre and post-visit. Oops, wrong direction. So I'm going to just in the top level. Parameters for exhibits means things you have to consider in parallel. So as you're thinking about what is the topic, how am I going to do it, you have to think about educational standards, the web feed and social feeds, experiential activations for both individuals and groups across a wide range of ages. A traveling exhibit has to be flexible and modular. We have to consider pacing. Pacing means you need spaces in an exhibit that are quiet and contemplative, others that are active and interactive and responsive, and again, towards group and individual experiences. A typical exhibit structure is there's a pre-visit. A teacher might sit with a class. Here we're going to learn about SETI. They show them 2001. You go into an introduction to the exhibit. You see the meat of the exhibit. You wrap it up, and then there's post-visit stickiness. Our two exhibit teams conceived two basic exhibits: SETI, Are We Alone? And First Contact, Are You Ready? The three key messages, it was so hard. We have hundreds, lists, 30 sheets of papers. What would a signal be? Of course, the detection, message, artifact, interaction. So you can think of this as the main topic and this as the sub-stories within. So 3 key topics, about half a dozen stories within each. Differentiates between SETI and METI, the history, psychology, science, missions, technology, etc. So everything you've talked about here today is in about that in terms of a whole exhibit. The implications and hurdles, size of the effort, budget limitations, threats to humanity, and everything else. So that's another major topic the team considered. In the first contact, Are You Ready? What is life and intelligence? A key theme. Define life, define intelligence. What's consciousness? Could we communicate? Use pop culture examples. Bring all of that together under that idea. The contact itself, a rich, rich topic, which would form possibly the meat of the subject, and the impact of that first contact on society, culture, politics, religion, etc. Ben Davis, where's Ben? He did this great diagram. You know, we wanted to get some bubble diagrams out of this. Ben took the first step, which is great, and you can see kind of how you notionally develop a concept and start laying it into space. So the group's key takeaway message is SETI is a global effort. So this is what the overarching thematic things that came out of our workshop were. It's a global effort. You'd want to communicate that to the public. We can't even imagine what we'll see. Can't even conceive. It'll be so different than what we imagine. It's, you know, a joke. We could see, this was something someone said today, we could see our future in their past if we were to discover an artifact or listen to a message. And I think it's a lot of bang for the buck. The money you're talking about for Breakthrough Starshot, while I think they're off by an order of magnitude, is still chump change. So we had some ideas. The first was the Interstellar Passport. Anyone else recognize this? It's from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The most important thing to take on your travels is a towel. So we thought you would get a towel for your passport, and that would be linked with a unique code that you would hang over the exhibit or use it in your own particular alien way. Don't ask me. Become your own alien. There's a lot of ways in gaming technology. We had a gaming designer. Clayton, is Clayton here? Clayton was here. He's a great gaming designer. I've done exhibits where you use green screens like the Weathermen, and you can transform people into interactive avatars. They can become that avatar throughout the whole exhibit. You have to interact with the slime blob as the tentacled, octopus. You can create evocative art pieces within an exhibit. This is a piece my team designed that suggests interstellar messages beaming across the galaxy. You could create interactive Drake equation sliders. Mark Millis and I were talking about this just a little while ago. You could create online interactive code and decode message schemes. This would be a very good social media tie-in. You could create your own, build your own alien. And the idea came out of, where's Sue? No, it was Phyllis, Lee's mother, to do a Mr. Potato version of Alien. Of course, it can be digital. I suggested my favorite, the magnetic mustache. Here's an interesting idea suggesting a concrete use of a technology. You're all familiar with whisper chambers, so those parabolic mirrors. You could set up a series of them to suggest how difficult it is to align up your communications. Why is it difficult? These are rotating. We conceived of the idea of sending messages, slow Facebook. so that you would send a message, and through the exhibit app, it would slow the message down to the speed of light. Many, many other things for a cost of about $2.5 million. Thank you.
Well, our working track was step by step to the stars. Question was, how do we get from where we are now to interstellar missions, and how do we get long-term support and interest in society as a whole? Now, we realized those are two different questions, so we had two different subtracks. One subtrack, dealing with societal support, started talking about how do we get this support, and very quickly realized that we don't know what kind of support we have right now. So we decided that the very first thing to do was to take a survey of societal support for interstellar topics and use that as a baseline, and to run that survey regularly into the future so that we could see changes. That's the only way you can see the effect of your efforts. There are, oddly enough, well, not oddly enough, there is a survey that has in fact been ongoing for 40 years now, called the General Social Survey, which does exactly that. It tracks the long-term trends in various topics among society as a whole. So what we are going to try to do, and there's a low probability of success, but what we're going to try to do is get some questions added to that survey. If that in fact doesn't eventuate, we're going to talk to some professional folks who administer surveys and see what we can do to get surveys presented and return data that is scientifically valid. The types of questions we're looking at, among with the standard demographic questions that all these surveys ask, are some space science literacy questions such as, are you aware of the existence of planets around other stars? Now, many of these will seem very trivial to those of us here, but these are things we want to get a feel for the general awareness in society as a whole. Big picture questions. To what extent do you think the future of humanity lies at least in part beyond the Earth, with a gradation from very much to not at all? To what extent are space missions outside of our solar system valuable to society? Again, from very much to not at all. And what value for humanity do you see in exploration of other worlds? That being an open-ended question. Should humans seek to settle other worlds? Other questions about astrobiology. How likely do you think it is that we'll find life on another world in your lifetime? From nearly impossible to nearly certain. If we find signs of life on another world, to what extent would this increase your interest in interstellar missions? Very much to not at all. Interstellar missions, to what extent would you be willing to financially support a mission to a world beyond our own solar system? Not at all to very much. To what extent would you be enthusiastic about such a mission if you believed it could provide very good information, but not within your own lifetime? Very much to not at all. And what percentage of the effort currently devoted to space by government or private organizations should be devoted to interstellar missions? None, 1 to 5%, 5 to 10%, 10 to 15%, more than 15%. And a couple of ethical questions. What is your biggest concern about interstellar missions? It takes too long, it costs too much, negative impact on other worlds, distractions from problems on Earth. And if we find signs of life on another world, should we, A, leave it alone, B, visit it as soon as possible, C, bring back a sample? These are initial questions. They can certainly be refined, but they're the kinds of things that we would want to put in a survey to gauge the initial support and interest in such topics. The other topic that we were working on was industrial infrastructure. What steps need to be taken next, not into the future, not if we do this in 70 years it'll be useful for interstellar exploration, but If we do this now, it will return on an investment 7% in 5 years, but eventually this will get us to the stars. I'm going to have Jason give the report on that.
Good afternoon. I'm Jason Malarczyk, and as Doug was mentioning, I helped run the subtrack for the industrial side. And the first day, we pretty much came up with a bunch of industries that we feel that needs to happen for us to reach the stars. Everything from agricultural to faster transportation, cheaper transportation. And yesterday, we boiled it down to the low-hanging fruit. 3 industries that we feel that need to happen sooner, within the next 5 years. First one being transportation costs need to be coming down, which is currently happening with Blue Origin and SpaceX. The next one we felt was some type of tourism, like virtual tourism, putting robots on the moon or in low orbit and selling share time to kids as like a video game to control and operate, generate interest, and a revenue stream. And then the third thing we were thinking about was the mining. Being able to mine the water, mine like gold and stuff and sell on the market, or to use as your basic resources for the 3D printers. And then today we were talking about, and one of the other things we did was look at some of the financial aspects of it, the returns on like the gold and stuff like that. And then one of the ideas that was brought up was the need for a foundation for long-term investment, one that's not controlled or influenced by politics or government or short-term influences. And some of the ideas that was brought up was looking at like the Ben Franklin Foundation, ones that have lasted for hundreds of years and was able to maintain their finances and keep finances going. So I think that's it from my part.
Just to reiterate, what we, our thinking changed entirely this afternoon. We mentioned all these physical processes that need to happen and realized that all of them are already underway. What isn't underway is a strong financial instrument to provide long-term investment in interstellar topics. And that's where we got the idea of trying to come up with something analogous to the Ben Franklin Foundation. For those who don't know, just before Ben Franklin died, he put $3,000 in a trust, and that foundation still exists and is one of the largest foundations in the world. We need to talk to the managers of that foundation to see what they do and how they do it to maintain it, and then see if we can have people get interstellar shares. But that kind of finance, something to set the conditions to make it easier to go interstellar, is something that is currently lacking and needs to be built.
I would suggest that if you have questions, why don't you meet up with some of the folks and talk with some of your fellows over our dinner rather than do a question and answer session now, because Les runs a tight ship. And he's given me that eye right now. And we want to give Paul the full benefit of his time. So thank you very much.